Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. I remember how the sunlight drifted in through the kitchen window that morning, catching the edge of the old wooden cutting board. It was early, maybe 6:30, though I can't be sure anymore. My fingers moved slowly on autopilot, frying eggs, toasting bread, and brewing coffee. I set the table for 3, which felt strange, but I did it anyway. 2 mugs for coffee, 1 for tea. Michelle preferred tea in the mornings, Eric liked black coffee, and I was somewhere in between. It should have been a normal day. It wasn't. I was alone in my kitchen, or at least I believed I was. The house felt silent. Michelle should have been awake soon, but I half expected her not to come downstairs at all. Then there was him, Eric. He was still asleep in the guest bedroom. Or was he in our bed? I wasn't sure. Everything was slow, heavy, like I'd stepped into a dream I couldn't pull myself out of. A part of me thought, this is insane. You're making breakfast for your wife's lover. But the motions didn't stop. The spatula lifted the eggs from the pan, that faint sizzling sound the only sign of life I could cling to. My mind reeled with images from the night before. The second glass of wine she tried to hide, the half-eaten plate of pasta left out on the counter, her soft laughter drifting from the living room when she thought I was upstairs. Even then, I wasn't certain. Some corner of my mind had always suspected something was off, but I refused to put it into words. Maybe making breakfast was a way to assert control. Maybe it was an offering to the devil in my home. Maybe I just wanted to see their reaction when I brought plates to the table, my table, and calmly asked if they slept well. I'm not sure. All I know is my chest felt hollow, like something vital had been scooped out. I needed to do something, anything, just to feel normal for a second. The toast popped up. I took in the smell of slightly charred crust. Michelle always teased me for letting it burn a bit, said I liked my toast well done. She never truly complained, though. She used to grin at me across the table, eyes lighting up as we shared inside jokes about incompetent college roommates who couldn't cook anything beyond cereal. Now I couldn't even remember the last time she genuinely smiled at me. Maybe I didn't want to. The day before, I'd found her USB drive hidden in a drawer near her laptop. I knew better than to snoop, but I did it anyway. I found a folder labeled innocently enough, a string of random letters. And inside, there was the footage. Raw, grainy clips of Michelle's phone angled toward the corner of our kitchen. Her shape came into view, leaning casually against the counter, hair swept to one side. Then Eric's figure appeared, broad-shouldered, with that easy confidence of someone who's been at her side many times before. He laughed. She reached out and touched his shoulder. He pulled her close, pressed his lips to her neck. My breath caught in my throat. There was no audio, but I didn't need it. I saw the look on her face, the kind of look she used to give me years ago. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just watched in silence until the clip ended. Watched him slide his hand around her waist. Watched her tilt her head back, a small smile on her lips. Then I took the USB and left it on the counter, deciding that I'd say nothing. Let her see it there. Let her guess whether I'd looked or not. I wanted her to twist in that quiet dread. I hoped it would punish her more than any confrontation ever could. But last night, she had the nerve to bring him here, into our home. They tiptoed in, thinking I was asleep or out. I made sure to keep the bedroom door closed. No lights. I'm not sure which room they chose, guest or my own. All I know is, come morning, we 3 were under the same roof, and I was awake first. When Michelle finally came down the stairs, I was plating the eggs. She looked at me with wide eyes. I will never forget that look. It wasn't guilt, or fear, or shock. It was more like a stunned realization that she couldn't read me. Her silky robe clung to her figure. She ran a hand through her dark blonde hair, as if to smooth the night away. "You're making breakfast?" she asked quietly, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, set the plate on the table, gestured for her to sit. My hands were steady. An eerie calm had taken hold of me. My breathing felt slow, methodical. Inside, my stomach churned, but outwardly, I was all composure. She stood there, uncertain. "David, what's going on?" I didn't respond at first. I just handed her a mug of tea and motioned toward her chair. She perched on the edge, like she might bolt at any second. A heavy silence pressed between us. Then, steps on the stairs. Someone was coming down. When Eric appeared in the doorway, I didn't even blink. He looked from me to her, then back again, trying to gauge the situation. He was wearing a wrinkled button-up shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled. Chef's hands, I remember thinking. I'd watched videos of him working at some trendy restaurant, swirling sauces and plating artisanal dishes. Odd how those details come to you in moments like this. Michelle seemed to hold her breath. "Eric," she said faintly, "maybe you should." I cut her off by placing a plate of scrambled eggs in front of him. He stared at the plate, then at me, uncertain. I forced a small, tight-lipped smile. "Eat," I said. That was the first word I'd spoken aloud that morning. My voice felt distant to my own ears. He pulled out a chair, the legs scraping the tile floor. It was surreal. There we were, the three of us in the warm morning light, plates of food steaming up the room, coffee aroma mingling with tension so thick it was stifling. I remember Michelle wrapping her robe tighter around herself, suddenly self-conscious. I poured myself coffee. "How do you like your eggs, Eric?" I asked quietly, though I already prepared them. He cleared his throat. "Scrambled's fine," he said, voice a little shaky. "Thanks." Then, trying to sound natural, he added, "They smell great." Michelle closed her eyes for a moment. I caught the slight tremor in her hand as she lifted her mug. She sipped the tea, probably just to have something to do. I sipped my coffee, letting the bitter heat ground me. For a moment, I almost wanted them to say something, an explanation, an apology, anything. But I also relished their discomfort. I wanted them to squirm. Finally, Michelle glanced around nervously. "David, maybe we should talk." Still, I said nothing. I remember the hush in the kitchen, punctuated by the occasional clang of Eric's fork against his plate. He seemed compelled to eat, though I doubted he tasted a thing. The slow burn in my gut intensified, but I controlled my breathing. She reached out, tried to put a hand on mine. I pulled away slowly, set down my mug, and stood. I grabbed my coat from the peg near the back door. "I have to go," I mumbled, though it was Saturday and I had nowhere in particular. I just needed air. "You two enjoy breakfast." Then I walked out, leaving them in that suffocating quiet, letting them wonder what I knew. I was halfway down the block when a wave of nausea hit me. I paused, pressing a hand to the rough bark of an old oak tree. It was the strangest sensation, like my body was catching up to what my mind had only half processed. She brought him home. She didn't even wait for me to leave on a business trip or something. Why? The question looped in my head, but I didn't want to dig for answers. I already knew enough. I wandered aimlessly for hours, ignoring the drizzle that dampened my hair and shoulders. In my mind, I kept revisiting that USB footage like a broken record. The way she leaned into him, the tilt of her head, invitation in her eyes. My fists tightened at my sides, but I forced myself to keep walking, keep breathing. Anger threatened to break free, but something colder overtook me. If I raged, I'd break. I wasn't sure I'd ever piece myself back together. By the time I returned, the house was empty. A half-eaten breakfast remained on the table. 2 plates, barely touched. My plate was untouched. I gathered them, dumped the cold eggs, and rinsed everything in the sink. The tea had gone cold, a film floating on the surface. I poured it down the drain, watching it swirl away. That's how it felt, everything swirling away. Upstairs, I noticed the bed was still made. So they must have used the guest room. Or maybe the couch. I didn't check. There was a slight imprint on the cushions, an extra pillow scattered on the floor. My breath caught. I tried to stifle the image of them locked in some silent embrace hours before. That ache in my chest threatened to spill over, so I closed my eyes, counted to 10, let the numbness settle in again. She didn't come home that night. I made coffee around 7:00 p.m., forced down some instant ramen, then sat in the living room, lights off, the only glow coming from the TV. I wasn't really watching anything. It was just static background. My phone stayed silent. I didn't call her. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the clock ticking in the hallway. The hours crawled. At some point, my mind drifted to how she and I first met. A mutual friend's party, the way her laughter lit up the corner of the room. I remember thinking she was bright, dynamic, like a charge of electricity in a dead circuit. She wore a simple black dress, held a flute of champagne. Our eyes met across the crowd. We fell in love before we'd even spoken more than a handful of words. At least, that's how it felt then. Young and foolish, but so sure it was everything. I let myself remember how we used to kiss in the mornings. She'd pad into the kitchen barefoot, wearing my old Seattle Mariners hoodie, her hair a little messy, and she'd kiss me from behind while I fixed breakfast. Then we'd eat quietly, content in each other's company. That was real once. It stings to admit how real it was, because it makes the present sharper, crueler. She doesn't do that anymore. The last time I felt her lips was a quick peck on the cheek before a business trip months ago, and it had felt rehearsed, distant. Even then, I'd sensed something was wrong. I just didn't want to see it. The next day, I heard her key in the lock around midday. The door opened slowly. She stepped in, wearing sunglasses even though it wasn't particularly bright out, a sure sign she wanted to hide. She hesitated in the doorway, as though expecting me to lash out. Instead, I just looked at her from the couch, remote in hand, volume muted. "David." Her voice was soft, uncertain. I let the silence stretch. I thought about all the times I wanted to ask her where she'd been, who she'd been with, what exactly made her slip away from me. Instead, I just exhaled. Cold inside. She lifted the sunglasses to rest on her head and took a tentative step forward. "I didn't know if you'd be here," she said, as if that meant something. Then she tried again. "We need to talk. I owe you an explanation." I didn't respond. She moved closer, set her purse on the coffee table, glanced at the blank TV screen. She looked worn out, dark circles under her eyes. Her nails were chipped, which was unusual for her. She always kept them neat. I almost felt pity. Almost. "David, She swallowed, fiddling with her wedding ring. "I made a mistake. I know how it looks." I barked out a humorless laugh. "How it looks? It's not about appearances anymore." She flinched at my laugh. "I never wanted to hurt you." Still, I said nothing. The silence became an entity in the room, a wedge between us. Tears pooled in her hazel eyes, but I didn't move. She sank onto the couch a few feet away from me, folding her hands in her lap. "This thing with Eric, it started out as, God, I don't know, a friendship. He's interesting, and I was feeling lost. I guess I was searching for." I cut her off with a flick of my hand. "Don't," I murmured, not shouting. The word came out flat, lifeless. "Just don't." She pressed her lips together, tears slipping down her cheeks. She tried again, voice trembling. If you want me to leave, I will. But I want to make this right if there's any chance." I stared straight ahead. In my mind, I saw the images from the USB again. The easy familiarity in the way she leaned into him. There was no hesitation, no guilt on her face in that footage. So hearing her talk about making it right felt hollow. Too late. Something in me had snapped. She reached for my arm. "Please, David, you used to love me." "I know you did." I pulled away again. That contact burned. I didn't want her hands on me. Didn't want to see her tears or hear her confessions. Too little, too late. "Where's Eric?" I asked after a beat. My voice sounded rough. She stared. He went home. She paused, then added, "We're done." I ended it. I almost laughed again, a short, bitter sound. "Sure," I said. She opened her mouth to protest, but I got to my feet and stepped away. I didn't care about her excuses or half-promises. The truth was too big to be ignored or forgiven. She rose, too, brushing the tears from her cheeks. "I'll stay at a hotel for now," she said shakily. "I'll give you space." Then, turning away, she whispered, "I'm so sorry." I stood there, numb, as she grabbed a small suitcase from our closet and stuffed clothes inside. I heard quiet sobs from the bedroom, muffled behind a closed door, but I didn't go to her. Eventually, the front door shut again. I was alone in the silent house. Days passed. I went to work, performed my duties on autopilot, answered emails, led marketing meetings. No one suspected a thing. My colleagues saw me as calm, reliable David. My boss gave me a pat on the shoulder, asked if I wanted to grab a drink. I declined, citing a headache. I couldn't bring myself to talk to anyone. I returned home to that empty house each night. One evening, I found an envelope slipped under the front door. Inside was a single piece of paper with the results of a DNA test. My name, her name, Eric's name typed in neat lines. The conclusion was unambiguous. I don't even know why she bothered. Maybe Michelle had done it to confirm something. A pregnancy scare. Or was it a test of paternity? A cold wave washed over me as I read the words. So many questions, so little desire to ask them. Maybe she was trying to prove that there was no child on the way, as if that would fix everything. I tore the paper into tiny pieces, let them flutter into the trash can. I stopped returning her texts. She tried calling a few times, but I declined. My voicemail box filled with her messages. I deleted them without listening. Every day, I felt more hollow, more bitter. That sense of betrayal ate at me like acid, but it wasn't a roaring fire. It was an icy, creeping thing. Some nights, I'd sit at the dining table, staring at the USB drive perched on the counter, exactly where I'd left it. I knew she'd seen it. Maybe she realized I'd watched the footage. Or maybe not. Part of me hoped she was tortured by the thought of it, just as I was. Then Eric started calling. He must have gotten my number from some slip of paper or from her phone. Once, I picked up by accident, not recognizing the unknown caller. "David?" His voice was tentative. "Hey man, we need to talk." I said nothing. After a short silence, he cleared his throat. "Look, I'm sorry. I never meant." I ended the call. Blocked the number. That was that. Weeks slid by in that thick, slow haze of routine. Work consumed me. I poured my energy into spreadsheets, campaigns, and conference calls, hoping that mental exhaustion would spare me from the nights. But the nights were always waiting. The nights where I replayed every detail of my marriage, wondering when the cracks first appeared. I saw them both so vividly. Michelle's guarded eyes, Eric's easy grin as he stepped into my territory. A memory struck me. That morning I found a second wine glass in the sink. She brushed it off. Oh, I accidentally poured too much. I believed her, or forced myself to. Now I felt stupidity weigh on me. The shame of letting that lie slip past unchallenged. I started sleeping in the living room, because our bed felt like a crime scene. I stared at the ceiling, my mind drifting to revenge in the quiet hours. Not the violent kind. I wasn't a man to throw punches or wave a gun. My version of vengeance was silent. I wanted them both to feel that emptiness, that coldness that crawled under my skin. I wanted them to carry it around, day after day, until it broke them like it was breaking me. One morning, I woke up with a new sense of resolve. I packed up the last of Michelle's belongings, put them in the garage, taped the boxes shut. Then I wrote her a short note. "They're in the garage. Take them and go. David." Nothing more. I felt a flicker of grim satisfaction. A final push. If she wanted to talk, she'd have to face me. but I wouldn't say a word. She showed up that evening, tears threatening again, but I ignored her. I pointed to the garage. She tried to speak. I turned away. She lingered, probably hoping I'd break down, ask her to stay. I didn't. Eventually, I heard the car trunk slam shut. Then silence. I expected to feel relief. Instead, a deeper emptiness settled in. The house felt dead. No echoes of laughter, no footsteps overhead, no casual banter in the kitchen. Just me and the hum of the heater. That night, I sat alone, the overhead light off, the TV flickering in the corner, illuminating the living room in brief flashes. Another local station newscast. Something about traffic closures. People's lives moving forward. Mine stuck in a loop. At some point, my phone buzzed. Michelle. I nearly ignored it, but something made me swipe to answer. David. She breathed into the line. She paused, maybe realizing I wasn't going to say anything. She pressed on, voice raw. I know I can't fix this, but I never wanted to end us like this. My chest tightened. I swallowed against a bitter taste. Silence again. Talk to me, she pleaded, voice cracking. I closed my eyes, letting her hear the hush of my breathing. Then, in that same flat, cold tone I'd come to adopt, I said, "We loved each other once." "Do you remember?" She sniffled. "Yes," she whispered. "More than anything." I let out a slow exhale. "Then why bring him here?" My voice trembled at the edges, but I held it together. She faltered. "I was reckless. I convinced myself you didn't care anymore." I felt alone. My jaw clenched. "And now?" "I see what I've done," she said. Her words sounded watery, like she was crying. "It's too late, I know. But I still wanted you to know how sorry I am." I stared at the silent, flickering TV. A part of me wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Why him? When did it start? Did you ever think of me? But I didn't. I felt numb. So I listened to her ragged breathing for a long moment, and then ended the call without another word. At some point, the freeze between me and the world began to thaw, if only a little. I sensed that the next chapter involved me taking some kind of action. Something final. The USB drive sat on the counter, a reminder of that betrayal. I touched its edge, considered throwing it away. But no, I wanted it there. A sign, a witness. One late afternoon, I found Eric standing on my front porch. He must have been waiting for me to come home from work. He looked different, tired, maybe a little guilty. He was wearing a denim jacket, hands shoved in his pockets. My stomach twisted as I walked up the driveway. Anger rippled through me. He held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I just want to talk. Please." I let him stand there as I unlocked the door. Then I turned, giving him a flat stare. "What's there to say?" He stepped closer. "I never meant for it to get this far," he started, voice unsteady. "She was lonely. We connected over stupid stuff. Food, restaurants. It just happened." "It just happened," I echoed, voice as cold as the winter air. "In my house." He winced. "I know. It was disrespectful, beyond what I can say." I studied his face, searching for a trace of remorse that might matter. All I saw was desperation. Maybe for forgiveness, or maybe just to ease his own guilt. "I don't care why you did it," I said. "I only care about what you took from me." My voice trembled slightly on the last words, betraying an undertone of raw pain. He looked down. "I'm sorry." We stood in tense silence. I could hear cars passing in the distance, a dog barking from a neighbor's yard. Real life carrying on as though nothing was wrong. At last, I spoke. "You want absolution. You won't find it here," I said softly. Then I opened the door, stepped inside, and shut it in his face. My hand shook as I turned the deadbolt. Through the window, I saw him linger for a moment, shoulders sagging, before he walked away. I let out a shuddering breath and sank to my knees in the hallway. My head rested against the door, eyes squeezed shut. The adrenaline of facing him left me trembling. Despite it all, I felt a flicker of something akin to relief. I'd wanted to unleash my fury on him, tear into him with words. But the best revenge, my only real power, was to remain calm, show him he no longer had any hold over me or my emotions, even if I was dying inside. Time is strange after a betrayal. It both races and crawls. Another month drifted by. I saw Michelle a couple of times in passing, at the grocery store, of all places. She had a small cart, picking up fresh produce. She looked thinner, hair in a loose ponytail, eyes lacking that old spark. I walked right past her. She didn't try to talk. She just lowered her gaze to the floor. I started focusing on small routines, waking up early to jog, cooking dinner for one, tackling yard work on weekends. Mundane tasks that provided a veneer of normalcy. I told my boss I was open to more travel, more responsibilities. I wanted any excuse to be gone from that house, away from the ghosts haunting every corner. But I couldn't escape my own mind. Late at night, I'd feel the bitterness well up, a phantom taste at the back of my throat. The questions would swirl. Did she think of me when she was with him? Did she laugh differently with him? Did she find a deeper love, or was it just lust? I hated how these thoughts pinned me awake at 3:00 a.m., so I clung to the only solution I knew: silence. Eventually, Michelle reached out to me again, asking about finalizing certain logistical things. Bills, the mortgage, whether we should sell a house. I let her handle the details. Every email I sent was curt, minimal. Yes, that's fine. No preference. You can have them. That was the extent of my involvement. I wanted to let go of the life we'd built, piece by piece, without fuss. One evening, she showed up on the doorstep. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity got the better of me. When I saw her face, I realized something in her had changed. She looked worn, dark circles under her eyes, hair pinned back carelessly. She was holding a small envelope, her knuckles white. She tried to hand it to me. "What's this?" I asked, voice flat. "It's from my lawyer," she said. "Papers for separation. If that's what you want." I said nothing, just stared at the envelope. She looked away, tears forming again. "I can't keep waiting for you to. God, David, I don't even know. We can't go on like this." She forced herself to meet my eyes. "I'm not trying to push you, but we need closure. Something." I took the envelope, turned it over in my hand. I asked, "Why now?" She swallowed, voice trembling. "Because I can't stand this limbo. I know what I did. I'll have to live with it. But I can't keep hoping you'll take me back, or punishing myself with your silence every day. I need to move forward, even if that means ending everything officially." A long, heavy pause. "Does he make you happy?" I asked, the question leaving a bitter taste on my tongue. She looked stricken. "We're not. There's no relationship anymore. After you found out, it all fell apart." I couldn't bear how wrong it felt. She stepped forward. "It wasn't about him. It was about what I'd lost with you, and I was too selfish to face it." I stood there, feeling the slow burn in my chest. Part of me wanted to lash out, hurl everything I had bottled up at her. Another part just wanted to sign the damn papers. Finally, I turned away from her. "Leave," I said quietly. "I'll look them over." She lingered a moment. "David, I loved you. I still do." Her voice was barely audible. She left before I could say anything else, the door clicking softly behind her. I stared at the papers for a long time that night. Part of me wanted to tear them up, tell her to keep waiting in that painful stasis forever. Another part wanted to sign them right away, end it all, walk away. My mind was a storm of conflicting desires: vengeance, closure, heartbreak, regret. The hush in the house felt like a physical wave on my shoulders. Eventually, I folded the papers and set them aside. Not yet, I thought. Not yet. A couple days later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Michelle's in the hospital. Not serious, but you should know. I found out it was from one of her friends, a colleague in PR. She passed out at work, dehydration, and stress. My stomach twisted. Despite the anger, the bitterness, a flicker of concern lit up in me. She was still my wife, technically, or she had been my partner, at least. I went to the hospital after work, telling myself it was the humane thing to do. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I walked down the corridor to her room. She was propped up in a bed, an IV in her arm. She saw me at the doorway, eyes blinking in surprise. "You came," she said, voice raspy. I hovered near the threshold, not stepping in too far. "You all right?" They said exhaustion, dehydration. I guess I haven't been taking care of myself. She offered a weak smile. Ironic, isn't it? We let the silence spool out again, a ghost that hovered between us always. I noticed how pale she looked, how thin her wrists were under the hospital blanket. A nurse came in, asked if we needed anything. We both shook our heads and she left. Michelle picked at the edge of her blanket. "I can't stop thinking about how everything turned out," she admitted, her voice carrying a kind of raw resignation. "I did this to us." My chest tightened. "Why are you telling me this now?" She hesitated, tears filling her eyes again. "Because lying here, hooked up to an IV, thinking about how easily everything can slip away, I realized how desperately I wish I could go back, fix it. But I know I can't. So the least I can do is be honest." I nodded slowly. "It doesn't change anything," I said, though the words hurt to say. She nodded too, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "I know." Then softly, "I don't expect forgiveness." I looked at her, thinking about the times we'd sat side by side in hospital waiting rooms for less dire reasons. An old sports injury, a routine checkup. We'd hold hands, keep each other company, lighten the mood with jokes about how we hated the smell of antiseptic. Now, a chasm stretched between us. I stayed with her a few minutes more, letting the hush fill the space. Finally, I slipped out into the corridor. I didn't say goodbye. It felt pointless. My footsteps echoed on the linoleum, each step heavier than the last. Days later, she was released. I didn't reach out. I kept telling myself she was no longer my responsibility, that I'd done my part. Meanwhile, I hardly slept. My appetite dwindled. The house smelled of stale air. I'd lost interest in tidying or even opening the windows. One evening, I decided it was time to end this stalemate, on my terms. I knew how. I retrieved the USB drive from its spot on the counter, slipped it into my pocket. My heart pounded as I walked outside into the crisp night air. I got in my car and drove. Streets blurred past. I found myself parked in front of the building where she was renting a small apartment. A single light was on in one of the windows. I stepped out, holding the USB in my fist. On the way up the stairs, I noticed that same tightness in my chest, that same swirl of conflicting emotions. At her door, I paused, hand raised to knock, nearly paralyzed by the weight of it all. Finally, I rapped on the wood. After a moment, I heard shuffling, and the door cracked open. Michelle's eyes widened when she saw me. She looked disheveled, old sweatpants, her hair in a messy bun. No makeup. Her face was pale, lips slightly chapped. She didn't greet me, just stepped aside to let me in. The apartment was bare, half-unpacked boxes stacked in corners, a few pieces of furniture. No pictures on the walls, no sign of warmth. It struck me that she was living in as much emptiness as I was. I held out the USB. She stared at it as though it were a venomous snake. "You left this at home," I said quietly, forcing my voice to remain calm. Her eyes flickered with sudden understanding. She swallowed hard. "Did you?" I nodded. "Yes." She reached for it, trembling fingers taking the small device. Tears pooled in her eyes, but she didn't cry. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." "Words don't fix this," I said, tone lifeless. "This is the proof I needed, right? That I wasn't crazy." I let out a small, mirthless laugh. You didn't even try to hide it from yourself. You recorded it. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. It was stupid. I thought it was excitement. I don't know. I was lost. A thick silence settled. I glanced around the empty apartment, the quiet gloom, the single lamp casting dull light. It reminded me of my own house at night. No life, no joy, just regret. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Why did you come? She asked, voice cracking with desperation. I lifted my gaze to hers. Because I wanted you to have it. So you never forget. My words hung in the still air. What you did, what it cost. She let out a shaky breath. You came just to do that. To hurt me more. A part of me bristled. Yes, I said simply. Because you hurt me more than I ever thought possible. My voice wavered, threatening to release the storm inside me. She looked like she'd been slapped. Her jaw tightened, tears sliding down her cheeks. I know, she whispered. I closed my eyes, took a breath. Then I opened them. Look, I said, I'm done with this. I'm done letting your memory haunt me. I'm done letting Eric's face haunt me. You want me to sign those papers? Fine. I will. We'll end it. That's your punishment. For the rest of your life, remember that you chose this path. Remember it as the day you lost me. Michelle nodded, tears dripping off her chin. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I turned to leave, then paused at the door, resting a hand on the frame. My voice was rough when I spoke next. We used to love each other in a way I thought was unbreakable, I said, staring at a peeling spot of paint on the wall. It breaks anyway. She choked on a sob. I know. I gave a small bitter nod. Then I left. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks. Deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, I called my attorney, told him I'd sign. By afternoon, I was in his office, scrawling my name on the dotted line. My signature was shaky, but final. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Relief, sorrow, anger. I let them swirl together, bracing myself for the aftermath. Michelle texted to say she received the notice from her lawyer. She asked if I'd see her one last time, maybe have coffee, close this chapter amicably. I stared at her message for a long time before replying. No, good luck with your life. I hit send, then turned off my phone. A few weeks later, I was in the living room, finishing up a box of her random trinkets I'd found in a closet. An old necklace, some documents, a small stuffed bear I gave her on our first Valentine's Day. I planned to ship them to her, no note attached. I sealed the box, wrote her name, set it by the door. A final severance. As I stood there, I realized the hush in the house felt different. Less like a suffocating blanket, more like fresh air after a storm. I walked to the window. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the grass. I inhaled the quiet. The ache was still there, a bruise that would take time to heal. But a sense of closure, or maybe resignation, had settled into me. I thought about Eric, about Michelle, about the meltdown of our marriage. A small wry smile touched my lips. No real warmth in it, just acceptance that I'd survived the worst, and it hadn't destroyed me. I couldn't pretend I was okay, but I wasn't powerless anymore. I had chosen silence as my weapon. And in the end, it was the most devastating blow I could deal. By withholding every bit of myself, my anger, my sadness, my love, I forced them to face what they'd done without the catharsis of screaming or fighting. Now they would each carry that weight in their own way. I stepped outside onto the porch, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly, and felt something like a release. The grief might stay with me forever, but so would the knowledge that I didn't cave. I didn't beg or plead. I let them see the emptiness they'd left behind, made them wonder if I was still watching, still judging. But I wasn't. In truth, I was done caring. I sat down on the porch step, gazing at the sky tinged with orange and pink as the sun sank behind the row of houses. My heart felt hollow yet oddly calm. Memories rose unbidden. Her laugh, her touch, the warm mornings we once shared. They all seemed like another life, another man. I let those memories drift away, one by one, like leaves carried off by the wind. Not every pain is visible, I reminded myself, but it can destroy just the same. The difference is what we do with it once it's there. For me, I turned that pain into silence, letting it echo around them until they couldn't escape it. Now, maybe tomorrow I'd open the windows, let some fresh air sweep through the house. Maybe I'd rearrange the furniture, change everything that reminded me of her. I'd go for a hike, try a new coffee shop, or plan that fishing trip I'd been putting off for years. Anything to remind myself I was still here, still living, still capable of feeling something. Maybe not today, but someday. Night fell slowly, the first stars glimmering overhead. I remained on the porch until the chill sank into my bones, but I didn't move. It was a fitting end to a long, painful chapter. Eventually, I stood, my joints stiff, and went back inside. I locked the door behind me. For the first time in a long while, I felt no urge to look behind me or replay old memories. I flicked off the hallway light, leaving the house in darkness, and in that darkness I felt a weight lift. This was her hell and his, and it no longer had to be mine. I closed my eyes, let the silence surround me, then climbed the stairs and went to bed. I slept without dreams. The last thought in my mind was a simple one. I don't need to see her face again. I don't need to hear her apologies. I just need her to feel nothing from me, forever. That is my final word.